if she wants to run for supervisor again, it will have to.
Allegations of extravagant spending and questionable leadership choices have led to the rapid unraveling of Tiffany Henyard's political career in Dothan, Illinois. Once a dominant figure, Henyard's political empire is falling apart faster than anyone anticipated. The speed of her downfall has even surprised her most loyal supporters, who are desperately clinging to her as her power diminishes. The crisis reached a new peak when the Democratic Party in Thoron Township, for the first time in decades, decided to select its nominees through a caucus rather than the traditional primary election process. This shift in political strategy raised the stakes, particularly for Henyard, who also serves as the supervisor of Thoron Township and was eyeing a spot on the 2024 election ballot. However, Henyard's candidacy quickly faltered. At the caucus held at the Homewood Flossmoor Park District Auditorium, a critical oversight led to her disqualification. The failure to include a certified assessor on her slate rendered her candidacy invalid, an error that proved disastrous for her political ambitions. The mishap marked what many viewed as the most significant setback of her career, signaling a major blow to her influence in the region. The caucus, led by Illinois State Senator Napoleon Harris, who chairs the Thoron Township Democratic Committee, drew a large crowd. Hundreds of residents braved the cold weather to watch the political drama unfold. The energy in the auditorium was electric, as both Henyard's supporters and critics anticipated that this event could reshape the local political landscape. When the results were announced, the atmosphere was charged with emotion. Harris emerged victorious, clinching the Democratic nomination for township supervisor and effectively ousting Henyard from the race. The announcement, met with applause and jubilant cheers, had the feel of a knockout in a prize fight. Harris, composed and confident, delivered his remarks with an air of finality that underscored the gravity of the moment, leaving Henyard visibly stunned and disheartened. Her supporters, equally shocked, were left to process the unexpected turn of events. In a post-event statement, Henyard accused Harris and the Democratic Committee of deliberately orchestrating a strategy to block her candidacy, calling the caucus an unfair process designed to suppress voter choice. While her allegations stirred debate, many viewed them as the desperate defense of a politician whose tenure had been marred by controversy. Critics argued that while the caucus was an unconventional method, it followed legal procedures and was consistent with practices used in other Illinois townships. The outcome of the caucus highlighted the high stakes of local politics, signaling a seismic shift in the region's political landscape. With Henyard's defeat and Harris's victory, observers are left to wonder what the future holds for both political figures.
The caucus works right here in Thoron Township. You could also say that she flunked out because her name is not.
In a dramatic turn of events that showcased both defiance and division, Tiffany Henyard stormed out of the Homewood Flossmoor Park District Auditorium, flanked by some of her most loyal supporters. Her voice rang out with accusations of corruption and illegality, as she directed her fury squarely at State Senator Napoleon Harris, the chair of Thoron Township's Democratic Committee, shouting, "You didn't run any of this the right way, legally." Henyard's outburst was more than just frustration. It was a declaration of defiance, signaling that she would not concede without a fight. The fiery scene marked a pivotal moment in Henyard's political career, as her storming out reflected her refusal to bow to what she deemed an unjust process. Her accusations were pointed and sharp, aimed not only at her political adversaries but also at the very system that she believed was working against her. The caucus that night, which many described as chaotic yet decisive, effectively ended her tenure as the Democratic nominee for Thoron Township supervisor. Henyard's name was formally removed from the Democratic ballot, a public and symbolic blow that underscored her increasingly tenuous grip on power. For Henyard, the loss was far more than a procedural setback. It was a deeply humiliating moment. In front of a packed room of constituents and political adversaries, her candidacy was struck down, solidifying her place as one of the most polarizing figures in Illinois politics. The caucus, which was intended to decide the Democratic nominee for township supervisor, had not only removed Henyard, but had also revealed the fractures in her political foundation. Despite the overwhelming result, Henyard's resolve to fight back remained unshaken. As she left the auditorium, her supporters rallied around her, echoing claims of voter suppression and accusations that abrupt rule changes were specifically designed to disqualify her ticket. They argued that the venue's capacity limitations and last-minute procedural shifts had prevented many of Henyard's supporters participating in the primary on such short notice. Henyard's camp painted the caucus as a process marred by underhanded tactics and claimed that the outcome was the result of an orchestrated effort to oust her. However, Harris and the caucus organizers, backed by their legal team, dismissed these allegations. They maintained that the caucus followed Illinois law and was conducted fairly and openly. Harris's camp argued that the decision to hold a caucus, though unprecedented in Thorne Township for decades, was a lawful and strategic move used by other townships throughout the state. The defeat forced Henyard to reconsider her political future. With her name removed from the Democratic ballot, speculation began to swirl about her next steps. Some wondered if she might make a last-ditch attempt to run as an independent candidate or even pivot to a right-leaning platform. Such a move, while demonstrating her tenacity, carried the risk of further fracturing her already divided base of support. Henyard, a figure who had built her political career on a combination of controversy and resilience, seemed unlikely to simply walk away from the fight. Yet, despite her defiance and the unwavering loyalty of her core followers, the evening's events marked a watershed moment in her career. The loss underscored the challenges she now faced, not just in holding on to power, but in redefining her political identity in the face of the growing list of scandals that had marred her tenure as both mayor of Dolton and supervisor of Thorne Township. For her detractors, the caucus outcome was seen as a long overdue reckoning. Henyard's leadership had been scrutinized for everything from alleged financial mismanagement to accusations of self-serving governance, and this public defeat was viewed as a reflection of her dwindling credibility. To Henyard's supporters, however, the caucus was nothing short of a political ambush, an attempt to oust a strong-willed leader who had been unfairly targeted. Their claims of voter suppression and procedural manipulation underscored the polarizing divide that Henyard had come to represent in Illinois politics. As Henyard left the auditorium that night, flanked by both supporters and skeptics, it was clear that the battle was far from over. The events of the evening not only drew sharp battle lines for her next political confrontation, but they also symbolize the ongoing struggle of a leader whose resilience and defiance have defined her career, even as they continue to court controversy.
At the top itself from adults.
Of course we are talking.
Tiffany Henyard's crushing political defeat sent shockwaves through social media and among her constituents, igniting an outpouring of dissatisfaction and amplifying public discontent with her leadership. Critics seized the opportunity to frame her loss as yet another glaring example of her failures in governance, and as a clear sign that her grip on power was slipping rapidly. Many residents, already weary of her scandal-ridden tenure, began to voice their frustrations publicly, fueling a growing call for political change. One particularly vocal resident took to social media, rallying others to demand Henyard's immediate ousting. This rallying cry resonated deeply within the community, as it became clear that Henyard's leadership was not just ineffective, but actively damaging to the interests of the people she was supposed to serve. Amid the flurry of online criticism, a powerful quote emerged, echoing the sentiments of many. The more power someone has, the more corrupt they become. For countless disillusioned residents, this succinct statement captured the essence of Henyard's downfall, symbolizing the corrosive effects of unchecked authority and the perils of political arrogance. Once seen as a leader who exuded confidence, Henyard was now viewed as a politician whose ambition had spiraled out of control. Her refusal to acknowledge missteps or take responsibility for the consequences of her decisions further alienated her already disillusioned constituency. What followed Henyard's dramatic loss was not just a reaffirmation of her political failings, but a resounding indictment of her leadership style, which many saw as self-serving, disconnected, and dismissive of the community's concerns. For months, her detractors had warned of alleged corruption, dubious financial decisions, and poor management practices. But the loss at the caucus made these claims impossible to ignore. Her failure to inspire confidence in government or unite her constituents only emphasized that her administration appeared more focused on personal aggrandizement than on addressing the tangible challenges facing the community. This sentiment was widely shared online and in local conversations, deepening the public's mistrust and reinforcing the perception that OMUSH was emblematic of the very problems she had once promised to solve. Rather than rallying her community, Henyard's actions and rhetoric seemed to push an ever-widening wedge between her and the people she governed. Residents increasingly felt alienated, not just by her policies, but by her combative attitude toward criticism, and her unwillingness to engage in meaningful dialogue about the issues that affected their lives. Complaints about deteriorating infrastructure, inadequate public services, and financial mismanagement only added to the growing frustration. To those demanding accountability, her continued defiance in the face of mounting scandals seemed to confirm their worst suspicions about her priorities. For many, Henyard's leadership embodied a dangerous disconnect. She appeared entrenched in her own image of authority, oblivious to the mounting grievances of those around her. As the public outcry grew louder, Henyard's political future seemed more precarious than ever before. What had once been perceived as resolute determination by her supporters now appeared to be nothing more than sheer obstinacy to the wider electorate. Her devastating loss at the caucus was more than just a symbolic blow. It was a tangible rejection of her leadership, underscoring the electorate's growing exhaustion with an approach that seemed driven more by personal ambition than by concern for the community's welfare. Critics pointed out that Henyard's decisions often left constituents feeling neglected, while her frequent dismissal of public concerns only deepened the divide between her administration and the people. This alienation was particularly stark in the wake of her defeat, as calls for greater accountability and transparency gained momentum. Henyard's leadership, which had once been seen as a source of hope for change, had come to represent the dangers of political complacency and arrogance. Each new accusation against her, claims of lavish spending, disregard for procedural norms, and financial recklessness, only fueled the public's disillusionment. To those who had once supported her, the promise of progress felt like a broken covenant. For her critics, her tenure was a cautionary tale about the dangers of misplaced trust. As community frustrations grew, they coalesced into a resolute call for accountability, marking a turning point in the collective desire for political renewal. Henyard, meanwhile, appeared increasingly isolated, her base of support shrinking as each new scandal further tarnished her credibility. For a leader who had once prided herself on her tenacity and resilience, the stark reality of her diminishing influence was undeniable. As Henyard grappled with the fallout from her defeat, the disconnect between her and her constituents seemed insurmountable. Her once ironclad authority now appeared fragile, leaving her struggling to maintain relevance in a community that had grown weary of unmet promises and ineffective governance. While Henyard and her staunchest allies may have continued to challenge the legitimacy of the process that led to her downfall, it was clear that the electorate's patience had worn thin. Each passing day saw the clamor for change grow louder, and the specter of political irrelevance loomed ever closer. The perception of Henyard's leadership, once bold and ambitious, had now become a symbol of failure. As she tried to hold on to any semblance of influence, it was evident that her political future was uncertain, and her legacy had become increasingly controversial. Henyard's fall from grace marked not just a personal defeat, but a collective reckoning for a community that had long struggled with the consequences of her leadership. It was a stark reminder of how power, when unchecked and misused, can quickly spiral into disillusionment and discontent. The growing calls for accountability and political change left little doubt that Henyard's time in office was rapidly coming to an end. For many, her departure seemed inevitable, just a matter of time before the community would demand the fresh leadership it so desperately sought.
That's all it took for Tiffany Henyard to come out as the Democratic nominee for Thornton Township Supervisor, and she left here.
To fully comprehend Tiffany Henyard's dramatic fall from grace, it's essential to understand her meteoric rise to prominence and the carefully crafted image that once positioned her as a rising star in local politics. Initially celebrated as a visionary leader, Henyard secured dual roles as the mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township, a rare and powerful combination that elevated her status and cemented her as a figure of immense influence. She was seen as a super mayor, seemingly untouchable. This dual authority not only bolstered her reputation, but also provided her with a commanding platform for her political aspirations. However, Henyard's ascent soon began to unravel as the weight of controversy exposed cracks in her carefully constructed facade. Among the most damning allegations was the discovery of extravagant spending, including a staggering $33,000 charged to Amazon, allegedly for community purposes for Dalton residents. Many of these residents earned a median income far below $50,000, making this revelation particularly jarring. The contrast between Henyard's apparent opulence and the economic struggles of those she was elected to serve struck a deep chord, laying bare the disparity between her lavish lifestyle and the hardships faced by her constituents. These allegations, once unthinkable, unleashed a wave of shock, anger, and betrayal among the community. Residents who had placed their trust in Henyard, believing she represented their best interests, now saw her in a different light. As details of her spending habits came to light, it became clear to many that she had been grossly irresponsible and disconnected from the realities of the people she was meant to serve. To residents struggling to make ends meet, the accusations painted a picture of a leader indulging in extravagance while neglecting the pressing needs of her community. "It's repulsive that she's living like a queen while we can barely get by," lamented one Dalton resident, encapsulating the growing resentment among her electorate. These feelings of betrayal fueled a groundswell of disillusionment, sparking calls for accountability and driving a widening wedge between Henyard and the community that had once rallied behind her. Her financial decisions became emblematic of a deeper hypocrisy, exposing a glaring disparity between her promises of service and the self-serving reality that residents now perceived in her leadership. As scrutiny intensified, the political fallout became unavoidable. The allegations not only tarnished Henyard's reputation, but also served as a stark reminder of how far her leadership had strayed from the ideals she had once professed. Her critics grew increasingly vocal, their frustrations amplified by what they saw as the growing hypocrisy and corruption at the core of her administration. What was once a shining image of a champion for the people, a leader heralded for promises of integrity, transparency, and progress, had been replaced by a narrative of greed and mismanagement. For many, the contrast between her public persona and apparent private priorities highlighted a deep betrayal that shook the trust of even her most ardent supporters. The revelations surrounding her alleged misuse of funds marked a pivotal moment in Henyard's political career, driving the erosion of her support base and catalyzing a dramatic shift in public opinion. Residents who had once seen her as a beacon of hope for change now viewed her leadership as a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition and political arrogance. Tiffany Henyard's dramatic fall from grace has become a symbol of political excess, illustrating the widening divide between the leader she claimed to be and the realities faced by the average Dalton resident. Her critics framed her downfall as an inevitable reckoning of leadership marred by scandal, defined by decisions that prioritized personal comfort over the welfare of the community. As the weight of public outrage and mounting allegations bore down on her, the foundations of Henyard's political career began to crumble. The same platform that had propelled her rise, built on promises of integrity, service, and advocacy, became the stage for her dramatic collapse. The allegations against her not only overshadowed her accomplishments, but also solidified her legacy as one tarnished by controversy and lost potential. Henyard's failure to address the needs and concerns of her community while engaging in behavior perceived as extravagant and out of touch deepened the rift between her administration and the people it purported to serve. The impact of her political demise resonated far beyond her immediate sphere of influence, serving as a cautionary tale of how the unchecked pursuit of power can alienate and betray those it seeks to lead. For Dalton residents, the allegations against Henyard became a rallying point for change, reinforcing calls for leadership grounded in humility and accountability. The community's ability to receive effective services had been severely hindered by unnecessary political infighting, which left residents feeling frustrated and disillusioned. Voices within the community grew increasingly vocal about the negative impacts these constant disputes were having on their daily lives. Essential projects had been delayed, and basic services compromised. The focus shifted away from addressing the community's pressing needs, with political battles taking precedence instead. Many residents began to question whether the leadership of Tiffany Henyard, the Democratic candidate for Thornton Township Supervisor, was truly working for the people she represented, or if her actions were driven more by power struggles and personal ambition. The situation came to a head when Henyard dramatically exited the race in a mere 7 minutes, underscoring the high financial stakes involved in the ongoing conflict. Several other parties were involved in this dispute, and the failure to secure necessary permits could have dire consequences, including the possibility of a significant $40,000 fine. As the renovation project for Blackstone Park neared its completion, time was running out. If the deadlines for necessary approvals were missed, taxpayers could be left on the hook to repay money already allocated for the project. This reflected the larger issue at play, not just political gamesmanship, but missed opportunities created by infighting and ineffective leadership. According to Stephanie Wheatman, the executive director of the Park District, the expiring grants and permits were putting vital public benefits at risk. If these grants expire, it would be a lost opportunity for residents to gain access to improved parks and safe spaces for their families, Wheatman said. Henyard's confrontational and controlling leadership style had driven wedges within the community, deepening divides and preventing meaningful progress on key projects. Furthermore, her inner circle, once steadfast in its loyalty, was beginning to splinter, with longtime allies reportedly pulling away and staff resignations fueling rumors of growing internal conflict, which he argued in his demonstrations offered convicting evidence. Although no formal charges have been brought against Henyard, the FBI's investigation into her administration looms large, standing as one of the most damaging blows to her political authority. Some individuals reportedly spoke to FBI agents, suggesting potential malfeasance in her leadership, further eroding public trust. The mere existence of the investigation cast a shadow over her tenure, with mounting pressure affecting her ability to lead. At the same time, her political opponents seized on the indictment of one of her closest allies, former deputy police officer facing allegations of bankruptcy fraud, to amplify their claims of corruption within Henyard's administration. Despite this, Henyard attempted to push back against the growing wave of criticism, accusing her detractors of waging a smear campaign. In a recent fiery Facebook video, Henyard aggressively asked, "Why am I getting all this attention? What are they trying to distract you from?" She further promised to take legal action against those she believed had wronged her. However, it remains unclear whether she has any supporting evidence for these claims. Her dismissive attitude toward those calling out her mismanagement has only served to further alienate her from the public. The ongoing battles and controversies made it clear that Henyard's leadership was under siege, both from internal challenges and external opposition. The stakes for her political career could not have been higher, and the already fracturing support for her continued to dwindle as each new scandal emerged. As delays mounted and essential projects hung in the balance, her once increasingly precarious, Henyard attempts to placate the public, including organizing community events and engaging with media outlets, have largely backfired. Many accused her of desperation, attempting to appear concerned for the community in a way that felt false and contrived. These efforts only served to chip away at what little remained of her public image, deepening the perception that her leadership was out of touch with the needs of the people she was supposed to serve. At the heart of this unraveling situation is Henyard's aggressive, domineering leadership style, which has alienated many. It is no longer just about politics, it is about real, tangible consequences for the residents. As important grant funding expires and community projects falter, the deeper ramifications of her leadership become all too apparent. The rifts within her inner circle continue to deepen, with longtime allies stepping away and murmurs of staff dissatisfaction becoming harder to ignore. Henyard's political future now hangs in the balance, as the community she once promised to serve grows increasingly disillusioned with her leadership.